As much as I hate comparing iPhones to Pixels, well, how close does the Pixel 11 Pro get to last year's iPhone 17 Pro? Does Google's best of 2026 contend even with Apple's best of 2025? Well, let's find out in this video. Do me a favour though, hit subscribe to be part of our growing gang of like-minded Android nerds. There's nearly 500,000 of you out there talking about our favourite OS, and I think that is incredible. Cheers for your support, and I'd love to have you as part of the crew if you're new around here as well. So in any other year, it would be someone pointing out that the iPhone hasn't changed, but in the inverse, it's been a couple of years on the Pixel side of the fence for lack of changes. I like that Google has refined the design once again though, and I do think, yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, or don't try to fix it, and that definitely applies once again. The Pixel 11 Pro and the Pro XL, I think, take a well-received standout design and make admittedly very tiny changes. Nobody would have expected that just a few years ago. We had Pixels evolving on a yearly basis, and while Apple is the company who are trying to shake up their own phone design, at least they did last year, it's metal and glass versus glass and metal, and it's kind of the best way to describe these two designs. You've seen one before, and the other is a genuinely great take on what a modern iPhone should be. I do hate, though, how much better the iPhone's magnets are at the back of the phone. The Pixel Snap is just not quite as grippy. It is better than last year, but it could be a little bit stronger. With a violent shake, I think you might be able to dislodge your phone from a mount, but it would have to be a very violent shake, put it that way. The displays, though, are where things I think deviate a little bit as the Pixel 11 Pro gets another panel bump this time around, which elevates the maximum brightness to 3600 nits at its peak. The iPhone 17 Pro Max is still solid at 3000 nits, which matches the Pixel 10 Pro XL from last year, but the display tuning is quite different. I think, to my eye, Apple display, kind of the tuning on the display favors muted, more natural colours out of the box, while Google leans into more colours and contrast. You can change this at almost any time, which is great. I like to see the options available to make the experience how you want it. On the iPhone, the hardware gimmicks are the action button and camera control buttons. I'd hasten to add that they're not the gimmicks in the same way that highlight is on the Pixel. Sure, this LED has some utility, but I think bringing back notification LEDs only works in certain circumstances. It feels like a little bit of let's throw something in because we've got a lack of new hardware ideas. Apple does have a history in hardware, and their phones have almost been at the top of their game when they've designed them. Google has closed that quality gap in the past few years, but there really isn't as much separating this duo as maybe there were in years gone by, which is another great option for anyone looking at a brand new phone. I was also worried last year that Google might try and do the stupid thing of replicating liquid glass. Instead, we've seen something sort of weird happen. Gaussian blur and somewhat frosted glass have been put into more places with Android 17 and the upcoming Android 17 QPR1 release, which is set to arrive in just a few weeks. With iOS 27, Apple is definitely leaning into more of that liquid glass element, which, again, I'm not a huge fan of, but they are playing catch up in a few AI areas. There's definitely an attempt at something akin to Gemini intelligence, which includes a new Siri overhaul. It's worth noting that Apple has enlisted the help of Google to bolster Siri by using Gemini models as the foundational layer. This helps pretty darn drastically, but I do think the agentic AI is somewhat like in certain Pixel features, a little bit, maybe not necessarily working in the ways it probably intended to. Gemini intelligence is coming first to Pixel 11 phones, and this is the first proper step into a realized experience that Apple is similarly trying to chase, a phone that does things automatically and in the right ways. Getting information at the point of contact with a friend or relative by surfacing that key information when it's needed definitely helps the most. I do think it's an ongoing process, and it definitely has improved drastically over Magic Q, which is effectively rebranded this year again. What's interesting is that Apple offers a lot more controls for Siri than you're given with Gemini. What I mean by that is that you're given options to pause, maybe adjust the speaking rate, the ability to disable spoken responses entirely if you wanted. Credit where it's due, this is a glaring omission on Pixel phones. And this goes beyond the basic, as you have the true accessibility options for the voice assistant, something which should definitely come to Gemini at some stage later down the line. Siri is allowing things like continued conversations for the first time here as well, which works similarly to Gemini Live, but I can't deny the ability to customize the voice is something that us Android fans would definitely be jealous of. You can kind of tune it how you want. On iOS 27, Siri stops listening too early, so if you kind of have to keep jumping in or chatting to have any real conversational flow, Gemini still handles this a lot better, and with more frequent model updates plus deep integration with personal intelligence, it definitely has the edge for anyone out there using a Google account if you care about AI functionality. As for iOS 27 versus Android 17, If you like one side of the fence, you're going to like that. If you don't like the other side of the fence, you're not going to like that. They're pretty much par for par, feature for feature, almost identical, and AI seems to be the way they're differentiating themselves once again. And fundamentally, the camera experience on the Pixel 11 Pro and the iPhone 17 Pro are quite similar. I think with the introduction of camera looks, we now have that replica of photographic style that we wanted, which is always great to see functionality at least being copied over or looked at and replicated on another side of the fence. Google's definitely more willing to put AI directly, though, into its camera experience. Think ProRes zoom, Magic Camera, Video Boost for video. The tools are all right there, and AI is a key component with that camera experience. On the iPhone, I think AI is definitely kept at arm's length in the camera section, which many photographers and videographers probably would arguably prefer. Camera tuning also feels markedly different once again. The skin tone reproduction on Pixel 11 Pro is among the best out there, and Real Tone has done wonders for skin tone reproduction. With Apple's warmer color palette, I think that is definitely going to be an acquired taste, and it still is to me. Many people still swear by it. Yeah, they like the iPhone look, and people like the Pixel look. But with photographic styles and camera looks, you can tune that as you see fit. I do think that Google needs to start to walk a bit more of a fine line, though, as hardware upgrades are still important to the camera system. They've made a change to the main sensor, but it's not necessarily a big enough leap. Yes, it's better in low light, but it's getting annoying that the camera's relying a little bit too heavily on AI, as kind of we're getting into further and further into the realms of image creation rather than photography itself. Sure, add neat AI-enhanced functions, but use those to help you take better photos. Don't over-rely on those. Again, I have to give credit where it's due. Like any Apple smartphone, the iPhone 17 Pro Max just does more with the raw camera hardware than the Pixel 11 Pro does. Yeah, without AI being thrown into the mix. So when we look at these two devices, Google is once again getting ahead of Apple in the release cycle. That seems to be the way that they're going to do things moving forward. The 11 Pro is definitely having some precious time on store shelves before the iPhone 18 launches. So we'll revisit this kind of comparison hopefully in the next coming weeks. It will be around a month before the next iPhone is available, but there isn't much to write home about right now about the Pixel 11 series as a whole. For me, I have to say, I don't think Apple is moving the needle on software right now, while Google isn't moving the needle on hardware. And while the Pixel 11 Pro isn't enough of a visual change for people to instantly know that this is a newer device when compared to last year's iPhone 17 Pro, you can ask people to spot the differences between the previous generation, and I do think the visual changes on the iPhone might be enough for someone to understand that it is a newer device, even though it's technically a year older. And I think in some ways that might hurt the Pixel this year, because before we start to get into some of the internal changes and particular RAM downgrades, the base model Pixel 11 Pro, when pitted against the base model iPhone 17 Pro, feels like a bit of a bad value product. And that is before we start to talk about the good components, such as the software, AI functionality, and solid camera tricks. I'm a little sad about how the Pixel 11 Pro moves the needle this year. It's expensive for what it is. At least I think with the iPhone, and I have to give credit where it's due. I've been saying that a lot in this video. The company has never really been shy about the prices of their phones and potentially being more expensive than competition. You definitely get what you're given, if that makes sense. Whereas I think with the Pixel this year, it feels like a bit of a step to the side compared to the Pixel 10 series. So that makes it a bit of a tough recommendation for anyone looking at this if they're looking for an upgrade from an older device. I'm really hoping that we get better next time, especially with the Pixel 12 potentially having some changes that Google has alluded to in their own conversations with the media and everyone else in between. But yeah, let me know what you think. I don't necessarily think that the Pixel 11 Pro has caught Apple in any way, which isn't a good sign considering this phone is now almost a year old. But there are some good components, and as always, it is an Android phone, so I'm always going to root for Android over iOS. Let me know what you think down in the comment sections below, and if you have considered either of these devices. But until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you later.